All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Are we not? Are we not? Okay, we got the first question coming in. Check that out. Okay, so let's check that out and see who's here, all that good stuff. All right, so lady, if you don't have a Google Doc for memes of your teacher, you're not really in APUSH. How about that? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fiveable review session for tonight. Now, the focus area this time is going to be the Great Depression. Hey there, Keith from South Carolina. Good to hear from you in Pennsylvania. So the focus area is the Great Depression, but questions on the Great Depression will get priority over questions over other topics, but you can still ask about other topics. Okay, so come on in and ask a question. And remember, as far as upvoting, we want to make sure that people are thinking in those terms. Okay, so let's see. We've got one question. Okay, upvote questions if you think that if it's a good one. Remember, don't ask people in the chat to upvote, but you are more than welcome to go and you're more than welcome to go into your group chat or something like that, right? And tell people, hey, this is such a lit Fiveable review session. All right, so let's go ahead and start getting to those. Now we've only got one question. Y'all, come on. Let's get in here and ask some questions, but I'm about to get started answering those. All right, where did I get my t-shirt? This is I got this at americanaf.com. So it's got George Washington as a rebel Star Wars pilot there. So yeah, that's a good source for patriotic APUSH t-shirts. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we've got one question. Okay. That is interesting. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get everything coming in here. Okay, I've only got one question. I would like to see some more. Okay, so James, were there any other stock markets that crashed other than the New York Stock Exchange? This was the only one I saw in my AP US history class. Okay, now as far as that goes, let's think about the exam here. Okay, so the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to prepare for the APUSH exam. And so as far as that goes, now, were there any other stock markets? I can't really tell you, actually, off the top of my head. And my general rule for this, okay, I've been teaching APUSH for more than 10 years. My general rule for this sort of thing is that if I can't tell you from the top of my head, it's probably not necessary for the exam. Now, might this be a worthy inquiry? Sure. But remember that the APUSH exam is much more about, taking some of these things that you're supposed to know, like basic knowledge of US history, and using this to make an argument. Okay. So when you're thinking about this, what does it matter as far as what happens here? I mean, I'm very curious, but I want to think about as far as I would be starting to get into New Deal programs, stuff like that, the CCC and some other things like that, and knowing that the stock market crashed. Now, the other thing is instead of thinking about were there other stock markets that crashed, why did the stock market crash? And what we want to say there is we're thinking about the stock market crash. Why did it crash? Okay, so there was a lot of speculation. People loved to buy stocks in the 1920s, and it got to such a point that John F. Kennedy's father. Now, this guy, I mean, he was bootlegging in the 1920s. I mean, this isn't any kind of, necessary. I mean, this is probably insider trading. All right. So he got out right before it happened. Okay. So right before the stock market crashed, then he got out of it. And so it's well, Joe, why did you get out of the stock market right before it crashed? We're so curious. And what Joe Kennedy said, okay, now take this as you want. But, I mean, Lana likes JFK, and, JFK's a great guy. I love me some JFK, okay? But as far as that goes, though, that Joe Kennedy, I don't think there's a lot of good to be said about Joe Kennedy. But at the same time, he said that he got a stock tip from a shoeshine boy. And he thought when he got a stock tip from a shoeshine boy, he's like, look, everybody's in the stock market. And that's not really the intent. Okay. So this is what happens. There are various points. Now, I hate the word various. Never use that in your essay. Okay. But sometimes I can use that because I don't have to take the exam. Right. And so there are different points in US history where there is speculation, which fuels some sort of economic catastrophe. Okay. So when we think about when we think about speculation. So speculation in the stock market. Now, what this is, if I think in terms of, let's say that I want to buy Tesla stock or SpaceX. Okay, let's say that I was, I really like Elon Musk's Twitter, and I think that, you know what, he's somebody that I'd like to invest in, and I have faith in SpaceX or something like that. Okay, so if I decide that I want to buy Elon Musk stock in SpaceX because I have faith in this company, then I probably should. Okay, that would be something that would be a worthy thing to do. But when I think about speculation, okay, when I think about speculation, then speculation is like, look, the stock market's doing really well right now, so I'm just going to buy stock and I'm planning on selling it soon. Okay, the way the stock market works, what people should be doing is holding on to stocks for a long time. Like, for example, if I had thought like in 2004 that, like, you know what, Apple one day is going to be more than computers. Okay, Apple is going to be more than computers one day, and so I should buy this stock, this new iPod. Y'all remember the iPod like back in the day? Y'all probably don't, but anyway, the thing is, as far as that goes, that if I decide, yeah, okay, some of y'all do, all right. So the thing is that if I decided, hey, I have faith in this company, I'm going to buy it. But when people start saying like, hey, I'm going to buy this stock and I'm going to sell it in a couple months because I can't go wrong. Phew, the stock market is just going crazy. And so with that, since I can't go wrong in the stock market, another thing I'll do is buy on the margin. All right. Now, when you're buying on the margin, it's like, okay, so I could make money on the stock market. I've only got $1,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend $10,000. Okay, so I'm going to spend $10,000 and I've only got $1,000. No problem. I'm going to borrow the other $9,000 from the bank, and so I'm going to go to my broker and like, hey, let me get $10,000 in this stock. And then what I do is the stock goes up. And a little bit later, I sell off everything. I pay back the loan. I put the money in my pocket. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with speculation. Now, that works really well until it doesn't, and when everybody's doing it. So everybody's just buying stock so that they can get rich. And so as that's going on, and even the shoe shine boys like, hey, I got a stock tip for you, Joe Kennedy, and it's like all of a sudden, okay, like it's just gone. All right. And that's the thing when you look into behavior like the speculation in the stock market. Now, another thing, of course, we'll get on some other things as far as the causes of the Great Depression. But my whole point, James, is what we need to be doing. Okay. So when you're writing a DDQ and LEQ, especially on your LEQ, or the SAQ is only asking for one piece of evidence per thing. But on an LEQ, like a good LEQ paragraph should really, instead of trying to say, hey, what other pieces of information can I get there? Okay, because what we don't want to do is getting into like the whole Bubba Gump thing, okay, where we're just like, naming off the kinds of shrimp. All right, this is what you don't want to do on your LEQ, is to start saying like, fried shrimp, shrimp gumbo, shrimp Creole, shrimp on a stick, shrimp cocktail, and you just start naming off all these ways that shrimp can be prepared, and then you're not really going into it. So what you really need to focus on, instead of this question, okay, and just helping you on the exam here, is how can I learn about this New York Stock Exchange crash a bit more deeply? And that's what you're right. Yeah, run, Forrest, run. Okay. Turn me into a butterfly so I can fly far, far away. Which actually, I think that's a bird, right? God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far away. All right. So glad to hear that some of y'all have seen that movie. I think some of y'all in here actually like that movie. Who gets hit first in the Great Depression? Sounds like a fight or something like that. Okay, I'm not sure how to answer that, Keith, but who gets hit first makes me want to like get in. Now, the thing about farmers is that farmers have not been doing great like the whole decade. Like essentially the Republican administrations were very pro-business. What I'd look at is not quite back to like the Gilded Age, but maybe somewhere between the Gilded Age and like Jeffersonian laissez-faire or something like that. Okay, and so as far as that goes, that the farmers hadn't been doing so well. Farmers and labor unions didn't do that well during the 1920s. Now, Herbert Hoover did sponsor the Farm Board. Okay, so as far as that goes, now let me make sure Hoover Farm Board. Yeah. So Hoover had the Federal Farm Board, basically trying to do something to help the farmers. So, but then again, I think as far as who gets hit first, understand what's going on in general. Okay. So let's, now this is a great question, Jade, about realignment. Okay. So when we think about realignment, and then I like this too. Why? Okay, so we've got a question here. Why? So we know that African Americans started supporting the Democratic Party during the New Deal. Why did they do that? Now, especially when we think in hindsight, stay hydrated, kids. All right, so as far as that goes, all right, so African Americans, why did they start voting heavily Democratic? Before that, they voted Republican, and that goes back to radical Reconstruction. Yes, Jug. Okay, radical Reconstruction, and the Republican Party was the party that was catering to the African American vote, and that, of course, kept the Republican Party in power during Reconstruction. Now, during Jim Crow, there were some things that happened there that, of course, most Black people, especially in the South, were not voting during that time. But as far as that goes, remember in the 1920s, we've got the Great Migration. Okay, so we start to see Black Americans going to northern cities, and they're spreading out, and in those cities they're voting, and FDR did very well in the urban centers. Now, as far as that goes, why did they start voting Democratic? FDR was really, also we want to note that Woodrow Wilson, the Democratic president during the Progressive era, he segregated the federal workforce. So, where Black people and white people had worked together just fine in the federal government before that, Woodrow Wilson segregated the federal workforce. And so what happened here was that FDR put together the New Deal coalition. And one thing that we want to note about FDR, he was a really good politician. He knew where to draw the line. Okay, he had this coalition. Imagine if this coalition existed today, that he had immigrants, Jews, Catholics, as far as religious minorities, Blacks and Southern whites. And so you imagine that coalition. Now, FDR had to be careful because he didn't want to offend these Southern white voters who supported him. Now, Harry Truman is a bit different. Harry Truman was like, I'm going to integrate the military by executive order, and you can't stop me because it is the right thing to do. Okay, so as far as that goes, that FDR during the New Deal. Now, Calvin Coolidge had actually asked Congress for a federal anti-lynching law during the 1920s. FDR never asked for a federal anti-lynching law, and FDR never tried to challenge Jim Crow segregation or anything like that. But what FDR did that actually meant something is that when there were New Deal programs, he made sure that those included African Americans as well. Now, he's not necessarily integrating these New Deal programs, but like there would be, when he's making the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, there are Black CCC camps as well as white CCC camps. So FDR is showing Black Americans that, like, I'm actually sensitive to what you're going through. And while peak unemployment during the Depression was about 25%, Black unemployment was about 50%. And so FDR also during World War II, there was the executive order, 8801, I believe, which if you don't remember the numbers, so wait, actually, you know what? I was, okay. It was 8802. Now, let me make that clear, okay? So what I just did, Executive Order 8802, rather than 8801. Just to be clear, if you wrote that on a DBQ, LEQ, SAQ, you said 8801, the grader is not going to say, oops, wrong, okay, because you said 8801, not 8802, okay? Just remember on the exam, there's a difference between a minor error and a major error, okay? So minor errors versus major errors. So just remember that, it's not the end of the world like what I just did there. What matters is that we know what it is, okay? It's not so much, okay, you were a little bit, yeah, exactly. It shows I was close enough. Now, again, I can't just say Executive Order 8801, fried shrimp, baked shrimp, shrimp cocktail, shrimp creole, shrimp etouffee, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I have to note that what was it that it did? That it banned any kind of discrimination based on race for war contractors. So according to Executive Order 8802, if you had a contract with the federal government, you could not discriminate based on race or ethnicity. Now, this was not just for Black people. One thing that I was looking at, it was actually just a couple weeks ago. I didn't think about this, but now we hear about Japanese internment, but there's also the issue that people of German and Italian descent, they were having a hard time getting, German Americans and Italian Americans were having a hard time getting some of these jobs during wartime, and it was resulting in a lot lower morale. These are people who had been born in the United States, but since they were the enemy or seen as the enemy, they weren't getting these jobs. So this was for Black Americans, Italian Americans, German Americans as well. So, that's the thing, that while FDR didn't back any kind of like radical reforms that would tick off his Southern white base in the South, he did do what he could. Also, the Tuskegee Airmen, who were some of the heroic fighter pilots during World War II, this actually started off as Red Tails. There's a movie about that, and so as far as that goes, that when we look at the Tuskegee Airmen, this started off as an experiment that was funded by the federal government. Like, they funded research at the Tuskegee Institute to see if a Black man was capable of flying a plane. And so, notice that they kind of couch this like what ends up being something that's a big step forward for African Americans, like being able to, be fighter pilots. The way that FDR kind of couched this, we're just doing an experiment, right? And so as far as that goes, we want to note here that FDR did what he could, and he was really the first president to really acknowledge the economic plight of African Americans, and they appreciated that. And ever since then, we've seen that Black Americans have been the most reliable Democratic Party voting bloc. Now, of course, if you ask Kanye, he'd like to see that change, and it's possible in the future there may be another realignment. Black voters used to vote Republican, then at some point they started voting Democratic. Now, of course, that was cemented by the Civil Rights Movement. The Democratic Party really ended up going all in with that. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, yes, the shrimp reference is from Forrest Gump. All right. So what happened to the rich? How were they affected? What did they do in response? That's an interesting question, Max. Now, one thing that I think is important to note, I've got Amity Schleye's biography of Calvin Coolidge. She's also got a book called The Forgotten Man, okay? And The Forgotten Man, now FDR talks about the Forgotten Man, but then the way that Schleye's puts it in her book, The Forgotten Man, is that FDR's policies, they're aimed at people. They're aimed at people who were suffering from unemployment. But what about, when we think about that unemployment was 25%, what we forget about is that there were 75% of Americans who were gainfully employed during the Great Depression. It's not like every single, Edward, you like that Kanye, huh? All right, I tell you, I love me some Kanye. And so as far as that, but there were people who were trying to do business during this time. And one thing I'd invite you to look at is the Schechter Poultry Corporation versus the United States case, Schechter versus the United States. And this was, if you're looking for specific evidence, this was a court case. This is one of those where we know that the Supreme Court, not a big fan of the New Deal, just like they struck down the Keating-Owen Act during the Progressive era that was, against child labor. The Supreme Court was like, that is stretching the Commerce Clause a little too much. And so the National Recovery Administration, otherwise known as the NRA, a different one than the interest group today, of course. But the National Recovery Administration is basically, it was designed to come up with codes of fair competition, which some people have referred to this, and I'm not saying that FDR was a fascist, but what's going into this is the NRA was actually telling people how to run their business, all right, which was really like when you think about communism, that's something where the government will own the means of production, whereas in a fascist economy, the private individuals own the means of production, but the government tells them how to run it. And they better listen to that. And so what happens here, again, I'm not calling FDR fascist or anything like that. Now, there were people who accused FDR of being some sort of socialist. FDR didn't see himself like that. Now, of course, there were people on the left that said that he wasn't going far enough in implementing, socialist-driven policies. But as far as that goes in Schechter Poultry Corporation versus the United States, what you saw here is that the Schechter Poultry Corporation, these were Jewish kosher butchers in New York City, and they were engaged in intrastate commerce. Everything they did was in the state of New York, that they had chickens that had been raised in New York. Those chickens were slaughtered, and they were slaughtered in the kosher way at the Schechter Brothers Poultry Corporation. And so the National Recovery Administration, they had these agents that would come in, and they would tell people how to run their business. And at some point, one of these agents got into it with one of the customers and was arguing with this customer. And so one of the Schechter brothers said, "You can leave. You need to get out of here." And so then a federal, they brought the police in here and they arrested the Schechter brothers, like for violating the National Recovery Administration. These are a couple guys that are just trying to run their business, and they're not wealthy. Like, these are Jewish immigrants. Yeah, it was a lot of things here. Oh, you're talking about the New Deal in general. But as far as that goes, yeah, and the thing is, a lot of the historical consensus is that the New Deal programs did not end the Great Depression. Now, the thing is, they did, though, as far as, it's a guy, Kennedy, I forget his first name, but he's like one of the best known scholars right now of the New Deal. And he says that even though they might not have ended the Depression, they laid a lot of the groundwork for the modern post-war economy that we had later. But back to the Schechter brothers. I'm getting distracted by the chat here. So as far as that goes, that the Schechter brothers then were represented by the ACLU, and they took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And these guys that are just trying to do business, they're saying, look, the federal government is trying to interfere with our business on the great, and it's, the Commerce Clause says that our business should not be directly controlled by the federal government. And then the Supreme Court says, you know what, and I believe it was a 9-0 decision, that, this is not okay. And so that's when FDR comes out in a press conference and he says that the Supreme Court has this horse and buggy interpretation of the Constitution. And with this horse and buggy Constitution that FDR is saying, he says, look, we need to pack the court. And so he proposes this plan to Congress, proposes this plan that is going to be a court packing scheme. And he says that basically we're going to have like this much for, people that are, this much for people, any justice over a certain age. Now, Congress told FDR, hold it, okay? Now, John Adams, when he wanted to pack the court with midnight judges, then Congress was like, okay. But when FDR tried to do it, not so much, okay? So as far as that goes, that would be, I would note here that there were actually working people. So when FDR's New Deal is trying to help the unemployed, it was in some ways having a negative effect on people who were just trying to run their business. Now, as far as the rich, now, of course, there were tax increases. One thing I'm going to say, now that goes back to Hoover, that really part of the Great Depression that you need to understand is that it never really needed to get like that, that Herbert Hoover did all the wrong stuff, okay? That basically the economy was so bad, okay? The economy was so bad, and then, okay, so the economy was so bad, and Hoover's like, let's raise taxes, okay? Now, raising taxes cuts down on economic output, okay? And especially so when, Ocasio-Cortez, starts talking about how the tax rates were at 70% at one point. That's not something to brag about, okay? That's not like necessarily, like, even Bernie said, like, when Bernie was running, he said like 55%. And I don't mean to get too into politics here, but when we look at 70% tax rates, the top tax rate in China is 60%. not a free country, okay? So when we start talking about a top tax rate of 70%, like all of the, the quote socialist countries in Europe, their tax rate is around 50 or 55%, okay? So Herbert Hoover was responsible for raising taxes. And so he does that. Then he comes out with the Hawley-Smoot Tariff, which of course was the second largest tariff in US history. So the economy's bad, so let's raise taxes. And then let's have the second biggest tariff that ever happened in US history so that we cut global trade by 2/3. Great idea, okay? Like just so great, Herbert Hoover. You're just so freaking brilliant, okay? I wish I was that smart so that I could understand how increasing taxes and increasing tariffs, I tell you, I mean, I really get, yeah, it's like, basically, just kind of get out there and just do this sort of thing. I am kind of passionate about this because I hate it when government screws up the economy. And Herbert Hoover, yeah, it's just, he was an engineer. Like now Coolidge, if Coolidge had been president, I think he would have just kept cool, all right? That, keep cool with Coolidge. He wouldn't have tried to tinker with everything. And so Herbert Hoover's like, oh, look at me. I'm an engineer. I'm such a smart guy. And and so that's the thing. Yeah, it really does frustrate me because the Great Depression didn't need to happen. The name of the tariff is the Hawley-Smoot Tariff, Hawley. And there was even a circular signed by like 2,000 economists, okay, that comes out and they're like, please don't do this tariff. Because think about this, the one tariff that was bigger was the tariff of 1828, and that resulted in the nullification crisis. And then I mean, it's just all kinds of just stuff that he's doing that just wasn't. So remember, what we need to note about Hoover is that there is this myth that Hoover didn't, this myth that Hoover didn't do anything. Now, he didn't do as much as FDR, but, oh, excuse me, I'll tell you, I'm like losing my breathing and all of that kind of stuff, okay? So, as far as that goes, just understand that, like, Hoover screwed things up, okay? Worse than they really had to be at that time. All right. So are there any major forces? Okay, now, Rebecca, I'm guessing that was probably, oh, she meant World War II. Thank you so much, Nancy. All right, so the thing is that somebody noted in the chat, okay, that the New Deal programs were really just like, yeah, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if it sticks, okay? So it's just like, yeah, let me just find something here, okay? And yeah, I mean, the New Deal, it's just, as far as that goes, that somebody compared the New Deal programs to like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if it sticks. And so as far as that goes, let's see here. I think this, yeah. So if I try that and it's just like, I'm going to see, let's see if it sticks. Okay. And it's not sticking. And Darth Revan's like, stop throwing stuff at me, okay? I mean, he's got like a freaking lightsaber. I should probably be a little bit more careful around him, right? It's like, don't throw stuff. No, that's Darth Revan, people. Like, come on now. Who's the real deal over here? Did anybody recognize that? If anybody recognized Revan, that's like, 10 points. James, yes, okay, you get extra credit, okay? Yes, you get extra credit. All right, tell your teacher to give you extra credit. I can't actually offer you extra credit, but as far as that goes, thank you so much, James. So yeah, that James Tedder is the real deal, people. James wouldn't have caused the Depression by doing a bunch of bad stuff. So the thing is that the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Now here's an example. Like FDR had these people, and this is good here, like as far as the brain trust, okay? As far as the brain trust. Now, the brain trust, these were smart people that FDR surrounded himself with, like some of the greatest like scholars. Now, we know that there are some people who have a lot of like scholarly credentials, but they're idiots, okay? Like you look at some of the stuff. Now, I think, in the history field, for example, there's some stuff that comes out that I'm like, yeah, this person's great, okay? Like Dr. Andrews' biography of Wade Hampton, like, love this book. It's a great book, okay? But as far as that goes, there's some stuff that comes out that you're like, where did this come from? Like this person, like, that just, and you think that they've got a lot of, book smarts, but they're not really connecting with people or the way things are, or whatever. But they're coming up with these ideas, and FDR's like, I'm willing to experiment here. And so the Agricultural Adjustment Act, check this out. The farmers are having a hard time. So what we're going to do during a time of the Depression, all right, y'all follow me here, is that we're going to pay farmers. We're going to subsidize farmers to plow over their crops because there's overproduction of crops. Okay, so we want to drive up crop prices. Okay, we want to drive up crop prices because the problem is the farmers are having a hard time because crop prices are too low. And so let's pay farmers to plow over their crops so that they don't go to market. And let's see if that works. Meanwhile, people in this country are going to soup kitchens. They're starving. There's not enough food, right? And then it's like, you're just like, let's see if this works. Whoa. It's like Darth Revan's going to cut my head off in a little bit. So as far as that goes, and that's costing the taxpayers money. So here's the thing: we're trying to help the farmers, but then what about the consumers that are buying food? So I'm taxes, which are going to subsidize farmers to artificially bring up the price of food. So how does this work? Now, of course, I want to be clear that today we subsidize grain farmers, dairy farmers, basically all the things that make people sick. And we're how do we sweeten this soft drink? Let's use corn syrup because that's subsidized by the government. Okay, and so as far as that goes, that this really, it's helping the farmers. Now think about this: relief, recovery, reform. Okay, the 3 R's of the New Deal: relief, recovery, reform. And so as far as that goes, when we think about relief, recovery, reform, it's like, okay, the Agricultural Adjustment Act is providing relief for the farmers, but it's not providing recovery for the overall economy. So FDR, when we think about relief, recovery, reform, relief, that was successful. Reform, that was successful. Recovery, not so much. So finally, when we are having a hard time with the Depression, Europe bails us out, okay? Look over there across the ocean. Europeans are killing each other again. And so as Europeans start killing each other, they need weapons with which to kill each other. And so we're like, you know what, let's go ahead and start doing that. Now, at first, with neutrality acts and all of that kind of stuff. But then it's like, look, it's kind of like one of those free real estate memes. It's like, Europeans killing each other exist. And it's like, we've got an opportunity to basically go to full employment. Okay. So as far as that goes, we go to full employment. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is what's going to drive the country out of the Depression, not FDR's programs. Now, does that mean, as I mentioned, the historian David Kennedy, I think is his name, he says that, look, there were, it's setting the stage. Okay. It's setting the stage for things later, because it's like Social Security, Medicare, those things have done a lot of good for people and provided a lot of stability. Now, the thing is that they also cost a lot of money that your generation's going to be like, whoa, when you start working, that like payroll taxes, no telling what's about to happen to those. So yes, note that the full production during World War II is what's really, so thank you, Europeans killing each other. You got us out of the Great Depression, okay, which that's the thing. I mean, Europeans are great people. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've already got on to that. So Nancy, I think we've already mentioned that. All right, so we're going to move on to the next thing here. What were Hoover's policies after the stock market crash? Okay, and I'm going to answer this briefly again, just in case somebody's watching a replay. Remember, go to fiveable.me and check out Fiveable Plus. Now, the cost of this is going to go up closer to the exam, and as far as that goes, that Fiveable Plus is going to give you the ability to see the replays. All right, you can see the replays, and then you can also be involved in our cram sessions we're doing in May. But Hoover's policies: tax increase, Hawley-Smoot Tariff, then the Farm Board. Okay, so the Farm Board was something put together to try to help farmers. The tax increase, of course, he increases the income tax, which we know is not a good idea. Now, this, of course, goes to the idea that, see, when FDR came in, FDR brings about Keynesian economics, okay, Keynesian economics, which endorses deficit spending in a time of economic turmoil. Now, you can do deficit spending in two ways. You can cut taxes, you can increase federal spending, or both. But what John Maynard Keynes said is that what John Maynard Keynes says that, spending can be higher than tax revenue in a time of economic turmoil. And what we need to do there is, if the spending you either cut the taxes, you put that back in the economy and let people kind of, let the economy kind of get it going there, or you can invest in what Keynes called shovel-ready projects. So when we think about the CCC and all of that kind of stuff, the CCC, the WPA, the PWA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, all of that kind of stuff. Now, as far as that goes, Hoover doesn't quite go that far, okay? So Hoover was against direct relief, okay? Hoover was against direct relief. That's a line that he would not cross, okay? But you do want to know about the Hawley-Smoot Tariff, which was the second highest tariff in U.S. history. That was designed, protectionists are thinking like, oh, I'm going to protect American jobs or something. And like, and basically we could do, anybody got some little SpongeBob memes with the alternating caps and small letters and all of that kind of stuff. If anybody does, please send them my way. Okay. If you've got, I'm going to be on the lookout for SpongeBob memes. Okay. So if you want to have anything with Hoover, like, hey, I'm going to fix the Great Depression or something, I don't know. I mean, figure that out. Meme it, kids. Meme up. Okay. So I would say the Hawley-Smoot Tariff, the tax increase, and also the Farm Board was something that he created. So, and another thing to note, as I said, that there is a popular myth that Herbert Hoover did nothing during the Great Depression. Okay, so there is a popular myth about that. But at the same time, Herbert Hoover really kind of laid the foundation for what happened later with the New Deal. But he just didn't go that far. And Herbert Hoover emerged as a critic of New Deal programs. But remember, FDR is like, look, the government needs to be involved in direct relief. Okay, the government needs to provide direct relief to people. All right. So as far as that's concerned, ladies and gentlemen, moving on, and let's see here. This is a pretty broad question, but if you had to give one or two tips, okay, if you had to give one or two tips okay, I was about to answer this question, and then that question went away. So as far as that goes, let's see here. All right, besides stock markets crashing, okay, so when we get into causation, ladies and gentlemen, okay, so going into causation. So the causes, and let's see if this goes away before I can answer it. All right, there we go. Okay, so going into the causes of the Great Depression. Now, first of all, I've already mentioned previously the stock market crash and overproduction and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so when we think about overproduction, actually, overproduction is kind of a, let me take that one off because that's a little bit controversial, but some people say it. Now, the stock market crash, of course, from speculation. That's what I was saying here. Okay, the stock market crash is largely about, speculation. And then besides the stock market crash, what we've got would be overconsumption. Okay, so let me talk about this and the installment plan. So what happens is the 1920s were a time of very rapid technological advancement. So what happens here is the automobile comes out. It's like, I need to buy an automobile. And then all of a sudden, electricity. That's kind of cool. I want lights in my house. And then I'm going to fund that by, I can't pay for it all at once, so I get it on the installment plan. Waffle iron. Clothes iron. Like, I don't just need an iron for my clothes, I also need an iron for my waffles. I need an iron for my waffles. And so as far as that goes, I got to iron my waffles, and it doesn't really work like that. Y'all have seen a waffle iron, right? But as far as that goes, a washing machine. I want all these new appliances. I want everything right now. And the Federal Reserve, which was created. Now, this is something we need to keep in mind here. The Federal Reserve was created in order for to regulate the money supply and the interest rates and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so regulate the money supply, regulate the interest rates, and all of that stuff there. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that the Federal Reserve, they provided cheap credit. They lowered interest rates. Now, the Federal Reserve is supposed to have like, these experts, all right? And so these experts were like, hey, let's keep the interest rates low. And what happens is people keep borrowing. No, bank holidays, not yet. That's not until FDR. But the interest rates are low. So when interest rates are low, the Federal Reserve, is encouraging people to borrow. And so people borrow. And then what happens in response is people, the manufacturing sector produces. And so what happens eventually is that all these consumers, they've got all of their appliances, but then they've got a bunch of consumer debt. And then as the manufacturers have kept producing, all of a sudden everybody's kind of got too much, they've got too much debt. They've already bought these things. And then the Federal Reserve's like, interest rate hike. Woo! Okay. And so all of a sudden, after like nearly an entire decade of cheap credit, all of a sudden now the Federal Reserve jacks up the interest rates, which you've already owe money. You could be in big trouble. And so that's something that this organization that was that was created by the government to actually like try to mitigate the whole boom and bust cycle, they ended up kind of helping it out. So, that's the thing when we talk about like consumer culture in the installment plan, but partly driven by the low interest rates with these cheap credit policies at that time. So that's something that I would say would be a major, factor there. And so then, we also see, and as far as that goes, Jade's noting that, as I said earlier, I think also we need to look at what Herbert Hoover did in response to the stock market crash and the stuff that was going on. I think that the initial government response to the Great Depression under Herbert Hoover, I think that is, that's definitely something that is problematic at this time as well. So let's not forget about that. All right, so what are the main points we need to know about the Great Depression for our exam? Okay, so as far as that goes, the main points that you need to know about the Great Depression for the exam. Now, I would pick a few New Deal programs. Okay, what I would not do is like look at every single New Deal program. Okay, because you're gonna, it's the whole alphabet soup thing. You're gonna get to where, So I would pick maybe 2 or 3 of the New Deal programs. So I've already mentioned the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Now, remember, if you're gonna pick one, you have to be able to explain it. So don't just get on an exam and be like the AAA, the CCC, the TVA, the PWA. That's not going to do you a bit of good. That you've got to have some kind of substance to that. You've got to understand what you're talking about. So pick a few things. And one thing, I really like the CCC. Any of y'all who go like and do things outdoors, there's Table Rock State Park in South Carolina. The CCC was the Civilian Conservation Corps. And this is how you need to look at this as evidence, okay? So if I've got to, like on an SAQ, like let's say that I'm called upon to name a New Deal or to discuss how a New Deal program implemented FDR's goals for the Depression, okay? So if we're thinking about that, then I would go into the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was created by FDR's administration, ratified by Congress, all of that kind of stuff. But it was created by legislation it was providing relief. Okay, it was providing relief. What they would do is they would get these young men and they would put them in camps. Like they'd actually be camping out in tents, and they would be working on state and federal parks. Okay, so they would be working on state and federal parks. And the Table Rock State Park has like a plaque for the Civilian Conservation Corps that they actually had a role in creating that trail. And so what would happen is you're living in a tent, you would get a little bit of the money that you're earning, but your family would get most of it. Most of it would be sent to your family. And so as far as that goes, that is one of the things that we see there, that he's providing relief, but also investing in shovel-ready projects. So those the improvements made to those national and state parks, they're actually lasting quite a while. Like we still benefit from those today. Now, another thing, you could go into the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Now, the Tennessee Valley Authority, this is one thing. I'm actually reading this book about Reconstruction, where I didn't realize, this author's saying essentially that, we always say Reconstruction ended with the compromise of 1877. But really, the Great Depression, yeah, this you could say, okay, you could say here that yes, I mean and of course this gets into hypotheticals and what ifs. Okay, this is going to go into hypotheticals and what ifs. So as far as that goes, and we think about that, you could make that argument, just like when I say that Hoover exacerbated the Great Depression, then what we're really saying here, I'm making an argument, okay? It's not like fact. Hoover exacerbated the Great Depression. But we do want to know, as far as the main points, you would want to be able to compare Herbert Hoover and FDR. Now, Herbert Hoover and FDR both tried to take action to help the people in the Great Depression. Okay, so yeah, I got a bunch of Harry Potter over here. Whenever I say, like, don't read your textbook like you're reading Harry Potter, some people think that I'm like hating on Harry Potter. I'm not. Okay, love me some Harry Potter. Anybody read The Wheel of Time? Which, if you've been through that ordeal, my goodness, that was quite a thing. But basically, noting that FDR and Hoover both created things to try to solve the Great Depression. But as far as that goes, that neither one of them necessarily worked, in the long run or the short run. And then FDR was willing to provide relief. Now, another story that you might want to note is the bonus army, okay, that Herbert Hoover was seen as very callous as a result of the bonus army. Because the bonus army, did anybody ask about the bonus army? I love this story, okay, I love this story. Okay, nobody's asking about the bonus army. So this was a group of World War I veterans. Okay, a group of World War I veterans who they were owed a bonus. Like around 1945, they were going to get a bonus for their service in World War I, which I'm guessing was kind of they were going to be like the young men would be like middle aged, maybe getting in close to retirement. Now, what the bonus army did in like 1932 is they marched on Washington and they demanded their bonus now. Now, of course, Herbert Hoover, and that's one of the contrasts between Hoover and FDR, is Herbert Hoover was not willing to embrace the Keynesian doctrine of deficit spending. Now, once again, Keynesian economics is something that some people buy into, some people don't, some people buy into it to an extent, okay? But as far as Hoover's like, look, we don't have the money right now, so we're not doing this. We don't owe this to you until 1945. And he tells Douglas MacArthur, get them out of Washington, D.C. Douglas MacArthur says, yes, sir. Now, this is a guy that didn't wear a helmet in World War I. He thought it was like a sissy thing to do, right? So he would go out on reconnaissance. He refused to wear a helmet because he's Douglas MacArthur. And so this is the same guy that wanted to use nukes in Korea. But at the same time, he was against, somebody was telling me yesterday, I need to verify this, but it sounds like MacArthur. He was against using the nukes in Japan because he wanted to invade Japan. This was going to be like his magnum opus as a general and make it, cement his reputation as military genius, which he ended up getting the chance at the Incheon landing. Okay, so I mean, MacArthur did have his shining moment to be a military genius. He just might have been a little bit insane. Okay, but MacArthur, he is charged with getting these veterans out of DC. And MacArthur not only runs them out of DC, but he uses tanks and he uses tear gas. And when he used this stuff, he gets them out of there. And then he goes, they've constructed a little Hooverville, a little shanty town right outside of Washington, D.C. In Anacostia Flats. And he orders his men to burn the camp. And so what happens here in a campaign year, in a re-election year, well, he's not going to get reelected, but the newspapers are saying that, like, look what the government did to these veterans. Look what the president allowed to happen, that not only were these veterans told no, but they were run out of town and their camp was burned. These are veterans, people. And Hoover never came out and denounced. He never publicly reprimanded MacArthur for exceeding his mandate. And so that's something that Hoover got the reputation. The public perception of Hoover was that the public perception of Hoover was that he could, that he doesn't care about people. And that's the thing about FDR that, somebody asked, why was it that black voters realigned during this time? Well, the thing is FDR, showed them that I actually care about you. And people didn't think that Hoover cared. And as far as that goes, FDR is like, look, I care about you. I love you, American people, and is trying to do things that are going to, at least make people feel better. And we can't really, from a political standpoint, we can't underestimate the power of like a president who actually makes people feel like they care. So as far as that goes, those are some things, but pick a few things from the New Deal. I would have like 2 or 3 New Deal programs in my arsenal, and I would go from there. Okay. Yes. Also, the thing is that FDR, the fireside chats, that was definitely a thing as far as FDR's like saying, look, I'm the president of the United States, but I'm here in your living room, which that's kind of like, could we call this? I need to get a fire going behind me, right? I don't know. I'd look like a book burner, like Fahrenheit 451. I don't need to burn books, but, that would be kind of cool. We're having a fireside chat here, aren't we? So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, those are some things there that I would note the causes of the Great Depression. Once again, 1 or 2 causes. There are a variety of causes. And remember, even though this gets kind of controversial, okay, that I want to note here that historical defensibility is the standard for making arguments. So you are going to make arguments when it comes to the Great Depression that are not universally agreed upon, that they are not, they're not facts, but if you can make an argument and defend it, okay, if you can make a logical argument and you can support it with evidence, then you're going to be fine, okay? So remember that as well. So if you, and that's another thing, we get into complex understanding, you're thinking in terms of showing that, like, I have a complex understanding of this, and I can even rank the causes, and I can say that this cause is credible, or this cause is not, so credible. And so as far as that goes, that's what you're doing. Causes, Hoover versus FDR, and then going into a few New Deal programs. Now, knowing the 3 R's of the New Deal: relief, recovery, reform, and noting that the New Deal was more successful with relief and reform than it was with recovery. So as far as that goes, those are some things that I would say. And remember that we don't need a whole slew of evidence. It's better to pick a few pieces of evidence, 2 or 3 pieces of evidence in a body paragraph, and develop them, rather than get into a, Bubba Gump shrimp rant or something like that. So as far as that, we've got that. Now, with the Great Depression, the result of the Republic. Okay, so Sam, that is something that we get into. Okay, we get into, could you make an argument? Could you make an argument? Could you put that together? So some people could say that the Republican Party and their, some people blame, Calvin Coolidge. Now, I am a big Calvin Coolidge fan. I like to keep cool. All right. So I'm a big Calvin Coolidge fan. Now, some people would say that perhaps Coolidge, now Andrew Mellon, Coolidge's Secretary of the Treasury, who stayed on into Hoover, they made him into what I see as a scapegoat. Okay. They said, they wanted to pick Andrew Mellon, who was this rich guy who was Secretary of the Treasury, who I thought did a pretty good job. Now, as far as that goes, I tend to lean right. Okay, there are other people who would make that argument. So what I want to note here is, Sam, that, as long as you can defend it, you can argue it. I've got a video that y'all might want to watch. If you'd like to, make sure you watch the ads. But in this video, the video is about historical judgments. Okay, so what we want to understand when you ask, was the Great Depression the result of the Republican Party's ideas over the economy during the 1920s? You could say, yes, here's the evidence. No, here's the evidence. Or here's a nuanced argument, okay, that maybe in some ways yes, in some ways no. But the thing is, what you've got to do is get the information and then put it together, okay, put it together. Now, also, I would say that, I think that Hoover, this is my view, okay, that Hoover turned away from Calvin Coolidge's, like, look, keep cool, let the economy do its thing and all of that kind of stuff. I think Hoover tried to tinker too much, which isn't so much a Republican policy as a Hoover policy. And of course, there is also the thing that, well, at least the government's doing something, right? If the government's seen as doing nothing, that's not a, that's something that a lot of people don't really like. Coolidge did keep cool. All right. So Megan, this is a pretty broad question. Okay. So yeah, and Megan, I'm just gonna reiterate this in case anybody's watching the replay. Any Fiveable Plus subscribers, great investment, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. The price will go up later, so check it out. Fiveable.me. All right, like give me a 5, right? You get it? It's kind of like Fiveable.me. Give me 5. All right. So as far as that goes, that DBQs, LEQs, when you're using evidence, okay, pick a couple of things. Like I would have like 2 to 3 pieces of evidence, 2 to 3 pieces of evidence in a paragraph, okay? And I would not try to go beyond that, because when you do that, you're crowding out, and you don't want to crowd out. You want to make sure that, I typically, my standard for something being evidence is, were there 2 complete sentences? One complete sentence to show what it is, and then another complete sentence to analyze it. Now, for the first evidence point, you at least need an explanation, okay? So if I mention the CCC, the TVA, the WPA, all that kind of stuff, no dice, okay? But if I pick 2 of them and I go into that, then I'm getting good evidence points. Okay, so that would be something that I would note there. Also, Megan, keep in mind that I've got videos on the DBQ and the LEQ, and well, I've got video on the Euro LEQ. But in my 8-month writing clinic, I've got a whole bunch of stuff there. If you're thinking about that, think about subscribing to that. I think it'd be a good investment. POV me. All right. So going into, did FDR? Oh my Lord. Okay, Owen. Whoo. Okay. I watched this PragerU video and they say he didn't really. Okay, now here's the thing, Owen. Now I'm going to tell you. Now, in this case, I would say that FDR didn't, but I would be very skeptical about using PragerU videos, because they are designed to be propaganda. Like when we look at the POV, and one of the things, like I actually responded to a PragerU video about was the Civil War about slavery. And of course, the guy just comes out and says like, okay, here are the reasons that the Civil War was about slavery. And that was all they said. Like there's no nuance in a PragerU video. Okay. The PragerU videos, they are trying to advance a position, and they tell a series of half-truths. Because if I were to say the Civil War was not at all about slavery, okay, and then I could bring out a bunch of information that's showing how the Civil War wasn't about slavery, but I'm not showing the whole picture. And so PragerU videos, the point is not to actually help you investigate and actually form an opinion. And y'all can see, like when y'all are asking me opinionated questions, I'm always being very clear that that is an opinionated question. Okay, I'm thinking that's an opinionated question, and we need to be careful about that, right? We need to be careful about it. And so we need to be careful with confusing facts from opinions. But yeah, I don't think that the New Deal programs, I think in a lot of cases, they might have extended it, because the economic cycle, it's like, according to classical economics, now that's where I would say that I have more sympathies with classical economics than Keynesian economics. And that is a viewpoint, okay? If somebody's more of a Keynesian, they're going to have a different perspective, okay? So as far as that goes, I mean, classical economics is based on the thoughts of Adam Smith. So that, but I would say that I would be very careful about PragerU videos, because they are all, they're all propaganda. And they're not really trying to give you both sides of the coin or anything like that. Okay, so how did the Sun Belt become important? Now that's the thing. So Ellie, the Sun Belt. Okay, I live in the Sun Belt. Now, the thing is, before World War II, you talk to anybody that's from the South, and odds are, when you go back about 3 generations, their ancestors were dirt poor, okay? And so what happened here was, the Sun Belt, after World War II, there are a couple things. First of all, there is the invention of air conditioning, okay? Or at least like air conditioning, I think, had been around, but it's becoming economical, okay? So when we're thinking about air conditioning, that now people can live in the Sun Belt. Of course, I've got a friend that lives in LA, and she doesn't even have an air conditioner. So that, I think it's possible in some places, but LA's right on the coast. But in most places in the South, if you don't have air conditioning, it is miserable. And I live in South Carolina, like upstate South Carolina, near the mountains. So imagine somebody that lives in Florida, like being there without any air conditioning. It's just like, my goodness. So technologically, air conditioning. Now, another thing we could say here is after World War II, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed. Okay, the Taft-Hartley Act was an act of Congress that enabled, now during the New Deal, okay, so during the New Deal, you had the National Labor Relations Act or the Wagner Act. Okay, so when we think about the Wagner Act, which set up the NLRB, okay, the Wagner Act or the National Labor Relations Act set up the National Labor Relations Board. That during the New Deal, federal policy went strongly pro-labor. Now, after World War II, just like after World War I, there were a bunch of strikes. And when there are a bunch of strikes, people turn against labor, okay? Like when you're trying to get somewhere and, you know, oh, by the way, like, you know, you go to France or something like that, and, oh, the trains are striking or something, or the cabs are striking, or the bus is striking, and so I've got to walk because this person's striking, that person's striking. You know, we don't have to deal with that mess all the time in the United States. And so the thing is, though, this was happening after World War II, and public opinion started to shift, and the Republicans in Congress passed the Taft-Hartley Act, which enabled states to become right-to-work states. Basically, states where, like, an employer cannot force you to join a labor union. So, for example, like in South Carolina, there is no, you know, they call it right to work because you have a right to work whether you are a member of the union or not. And so in South Carolina, you don't have to be a member of a union. And so what that does is that will drive wages down a bit. And of course, that attracts people to come in. Now, the wages may go down a little bit, but there are more jobs. And then when it comes down to it, I mean, for the cost of living in South Carolina, I think that I do as well. Now, I may not be paid as much as a teacher in New York, but the cost of living is less down here too. So I think, like, when it comes down to it, cost of living ratio and that sort of thing. So I would say that two things. I would say, first of all, air conditioning. Okay. Then, the interstate highway systems coming out, that sort of thing. In the South, is really like you get away from the harsh winters. Like my friends in the Midwest, those winters, I would not want to be involved in that. Now, me, when it's like, 27 degrees Celsius, what am I talking about? I'm freaking American, people. Who's got me using Celsius? All right. So, when it's like 27 degrees, then I'm like, whoa, this is really cold. Okay. So, then there are people talking about it being, I've experienced like the teens, like 17, 18 here in South Carolina, maybe once or twice in my entire life. Like, I don't know what below zero feels like. And I don't particularly care to know. Okay. I come from a semi-tropical climate. So air conditioning would be the biggest thing. Okay. It would be the biggest thing there. All right. So going from there, month of that's interesting, looking at a thematic approach, and we're about to wrap this up. Remember to go to fiveable.me, check out Fiveable Plus. It's got some benefits there you're going to want to look into, and they're cheaper now than they'll be in April and May when people actually want to pay for them. So the Great Depression, how did it shape or change American identity? Now, of course, before the Great Depression, there was this idea that y'all can have that in Pennsylvania. I'm in the Sun Belt, y'all. Okay, so as far as that goes, I love me some Florida. So let me actually answer the question here. Now, before the Great Depression, it was largely believed, like Hoover said, direct relief. We're not going to do that. That's not government's job. That's the job of private charities. And so one of the things here, I think that there is something now, American identity also, they talk about the so-called greatest generation. And, these are people that had been through something. It's like these Americans that are fighting in World War II, they've suffered. And so the idea that the government should, to some extent or another, should take care of people who are suffering, then that's what, I think that that's one of the things there that, when it comes down to it, that certainly there was a tolerance for, an expansion of government, which continued really through the 1970s. Now, after that, you saw the pendulum kind of swing back. So I think as a result of the New Deal, you definitely have more of a tolerance than existed before for government programs, and especially when it comes to social welfare programs that didn't really exist before the Great Depression. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen, I am going to be back soon. Okay, so let me go ahead and make sure. I'm going to take a look here. I'm guessing we should be on, let's say, oh, wait, did I? You know what? I've got the New Deal for next week, but I think that should we go into World War II next week? Y'all let me know. Let's go ahead and, so let's see here. If y'all will answer this poll here, okay? So, where are y'all right now, okay? Right now. Okay, so what I'm going to note here is Progressive Era, 1920s. Depression, Great Depression, let's see. Okay, so Great Depression, World War II, or are you post-war? Okay. Okay, so let me go ahead and put this poll. If y'all will help me out. So where are y'all right now? Okay, so y'all don't talk about those numbered periods. Come on, tell me what your test is on. Okay, so as far as that goes, a lot of you, okay, so we've got some people in the Great Depression, but it looks like we've got a lot of World War II and post-war. So you know what? I think that I'm going to go ahead and move up World War II. Okay, so it's okay. You know what? We are going to do World War II next week. Okay, so as far as that, or as they call it in the former Soviet Union, the Great Patriotic War. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward, because those of you on the Great Depression right now, y'all are going to be in a situation where you're going to be on World War II next time. All right, so going from there, I will change the topic for next week to World War II. So thank y'all so much. Remember to tell your friends about these reviews, and I will be back next week at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and we will talk about World War II. Hey, thank y'all. Okay, yeah, this was actually a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying these things. So looking forward to getting together next week. It's always a pleasure.